Welcome to the Leader Impact Podcast. We are a community of leaders with a network in over 350 cities around the world, dedicated to optimizing our personal, professional, and spiritual lives to have impact. This show is where we have a chance to listen and engage with leaders who are living this out. We love talking with leaders, so if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions to make the show even better, please let us know. The best way to stay connected in Canada is through our newsletter at leaderimpact.ca or on social media at LeaderImpact. If you are listening from outside of Canada, check out our website at leaderimpact.com. I'm your host, Lisa Peters, and our guest today is Glenda Mitchell. Glenda is a business consultant and coach, having worked in various advisory and leadership roles across a number of industries, including financial services, media, and the public sector. Born in South Africa and moving to Australia after completing her university degree, she is currently living in Florence, Italy, with her husband of 30 plus years. Glenda inspires people to engage in all areas of their lives and supports them on their journey to resolve issues, set priorities, identify opportunities for growth, and ultimately to flourish. Her greatest desire is to equip people to continue their own journey and to pass on what they've learned to those in their circle, to create a spark that lights an ember that ultimately creates a fire of passion and positive impact. Please join us now as we chat with Glenda about kicking out the bucket list and focusing on doing rather than dreaming. Welcome to the show, Glenda.
Thank you, Lisa. Lovely to be with you.
Well, it is very hard to track you down because you are doing it. And so I know that we struggle. Like, it's been months we've tried to get, but you're living the life. You are doing it. So congratulations on putting it out there and then living the life. So it's awesome to talk to you.
Thank you.
So we're going to get right into it. I've got some what I think are great questions, but I always look at these almost like counseling for Lisa. So I love these. But first, to anyone, I mean, nobody knows you, or maybe our viewers don't know you, but tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote Kicking Out the Bucket List.
Sometimes it's a difficult question to answer, Lisa, and I'm probably going to repeat a little bit of what you've already said. What I do find, I guess, when I meet people is there are two main things that they want to know about me. So where are you from and what do you do? The where you're from, you've covered a fair bit of it, but I'd sort of say I'm a South African-born Australian living in Florence, Italy. And that's a bit of a mouthful for people, so a bit of a long-winded answer. The other question, what do you do? Most times people mean, what do you do for a living? So I guess from what do I do from a living perspective, as you've said, I'm sort of a motivational leadership coach and also an aspiring author, which we'll cover off shortly, I'm sure. That's having spent a fair bit of my life in the sort of traditional corporate career in management consulting as a finance professor and project manager. But I guess the more interesting part of my life, I'd probably describe myself as an adventure-seeking, marathon-running traveller. I think that covers pretty much most things. Always looking to do something new. I love being with people, and I love inspiring other people to actually do things that they didn't ever dream of or didn't dream that they'd actually get to do. So that's probably summarizes me in a nutshell, which then links to why did I write the book, The Kicking Out the Bucket List, which incidentally hasn't actually been published yet, and I'm still sort of debating how I do that. That's my journey. But I wrote the bucket list firstly because every time I spoke to people and I told them about all my adventures and all my experiences, they kept saying, well, why don't you write a book? Because people would be interested. So that was kind of the first trigger. The second trigger was because when I started telling people about my experience running Paris Marathon or going to Everest Base Camp or sailing in the Caribbean, so many people said, I'm going to add that to my bucket list. And so I heard about this bucket list on numerous occasions. And sometimes I did find that I actually inspired people to actually get out there and do it. So do the marathon. But in a lot of instances, I found that all that happened is I was getting people to add it to their list, which was a never-ending list of things that they wanted to do that they never actually got to do. Hence the kicking out the bucket list. So I focused more on doing rather than listing all the things that somebody may intend to do and never get to doing.
Yeah. It's funny when you start listing them, I think of I almost feel like when you tell me, I'm like, oh, I should add that to my bucket list, and then I don't do it, I kind of feel like a bit of a failure. It's like, that was your bucket list. That's your journey. As you commented earlier about the book, this is my journey, to which, it is my own journey. So what do you think people are doing wrong when it comes to a bucket list, or what's the misconception of the bucket list?
Well, I'm going to go right back to how bucket lists actually started. I'm not sure if people even are aware that the term, as far as I can find, and obviously that's Wikipedia and Google telling me, that the term bucket list actually didn't exist before the movie in 2007 called The Bucket List. So that was the one with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. So they started the bucket list. And since then, it seems to have taken over the world. I'm not sure if the producers realized what the bucket list would actually do. But the misconception really is if you've seen the movie, if you haven't seen the movie, I'd encourage you to actually watch it. If you've seen the movie, people have sort of misinterpreted it a little bit in a lot of instances. So the movie didn't focus on them listing all the things that they wish they'd done in the past or that they'd missed out on doing. The movie actually focused on the two characters going and doing as much as they could before they kicked the bucket. So they happened to have a bit of a list of things that they were going to do, but the focus was on the doing. But what has happened a lot of the time these days is it's kind of been turned on its head, and the focus has been on the list, not rather than on the doing.
Yeah. And that's a good point. And I now have to rewatch that show because I know I watched it how long ago, but I got to rewatch that. One of my questions, which you may have addressed, which I sort of alluded to, is just that shame of not having a bucket list. And I don't know if you can address that and ideas to sort of kick that out, because when you listen to people or they talk about the bucket list, I don't have one. I almost feel, and I shouldn't, I know that, just this shame of, oh my gosh, I don't have one.
It's interesting. Yeah, when you say that word shame, I mean, that shame is such a big word. So I might even talk about it as the S word. I think that not having a bucket list could actually be a good thing. Because if you're a person that gets out there and does things and reaches for new goals and new achievements and all of that kind of thing, or you're content with not necessarily just the status quo, but you're content with who you are and what you've achieved and you're on the journey to achievement, I think that could be a good thing. So I think there could potentially be a positive in not having a bucket list. If not having a bucket list is because you're lazy, because you feel like you've done it all, you've achieved it all, you don't need to do anything more, then I don't know about shame, but I think that's pretty sad. My mother turned 90 this year, and she always says the day she stops dreaming or the day she stops wanting to do new things is the day she dies. And that's probably part of why I'm what I am. So, yeah, I guess to some degree, I sort of think, well, it could be bad, it could be good. I'd almost say, and I'm going to use the S word, I'd almost feel there's more shame in, it's not so much whether you have or you don't have a bucket list, but it's if you have a bucket list that keeps growing and you never do the things on the bucket list. That for me is where the shame is, because then it's like having this big to-do list that you never tick off. And that's what, as you said earlier, that's where you feel guilty. And then, to be honest, then I'd really say just chuck out, just get rid of that bucket list, because it's demotivational. Bucket list, if anything, is meant to be motivational. It's certainly not intended to be demotivational. So if a bucket list is going to start demotivating, then I'd say don't even try and think about prioritizing. Don't even think about it. Just get rid of the whole thing.
Yeah. So we're going to slip into a little bit of your book, and I know you had some content of how to make the most, or just how to kick out the bucket list. What do we do? Because I think people are listening. Okay, let's start then. Can you give me some ideas? So I'm going to leave it to you and going to jump in when I can.
Yeah, well, it's probably a bit of a mixture of some of the stuff in my book, because my book has a lot of stories, more than advice. It's getting people to think. But so it's a combination of what's in my book and I guess what I do with the clients when I'm coaching. And I've summarized it maybe as what I've called the 7 Ps. I don't know, people sort of like these summary kind of things. And I've got a few additions on the outside. And the first P that I say to people is about passion. It's about finding your passion. So we've referred to about putting things on our bucket list that other people have done. I'm saying, don't do that. Figure out what your own passion is. You can't steal someone else's passion. You may use their passion to give you ideas, and I don't think there's any harm in that. But we've got to find our own why factor. So what is it? Because otherwise, to be honest, we're all going to be running around like crazy people trying to do everything that everybody else does and be unhappy. So, what is it that's of value to you, and what's of value to the people around you, the people that you love, and hinge what you do on that passion. So that's sort of, for me, is almost the core, the central P to the 7 Ps. The next sort of 5 Ps I could group in the just do stuff. And I need to give credit to, there's a guy by the name of Kerry Gleason. He wrote a book a very, very long time ago, actually, called The Personal Efficiency Program. And it allows people, it's focused on professionals, and it's to make people more effective and to also avoid procrastination. And his biggest buzzword is about do it now. So rather than put it off, about do it now. And I used to run a program of his, and I just found then just by applying the mindset of doing it now was life-changing for people. But so there's sort of a caveat over that, because we can't just go and do everything now, because it's not going to be relevant, and we'll keep multitasking and trying to do everything. So we've got to do it now within the context of our passion. Mm-hmm. And then from that sort of do it now, or that do stuff, I've sort of broken it into 5 Ps, and it's stealing a little bit of stuff from Kerry's book and putting a practical lens over it. And the first P that I talk about is purge. So, and yes, there might not be a word that we use too much in our normal vocabulary, but I needed the P. So get rid of stuff. So if there's stuff that you've desperately put on your list, if you have got a list, or you keep thinking you should be doing, that fabulous word of I must or I should be because somebody else is doing it, look through and get rid of the stuff. If it doesn't match, let's go back to our passion. If it doesn't match your passion, just get rid of it, burn it, delete it. It's not in your brain. Get rid of that. So that's kind of the first P about doing stuff. If you decide to keep it and you haven't purged it, then prioritize. So then you focus on what stuff do you need to do now? What stuff can you do it now? So you can do the now. And what stuff do you still want to do because it's your passion, but you might want to do it later? So do some standard kind of prioritization. There's lots of tools and techniques that we've probably all kind of tried out there in terms of prioritize. Mm-hmm. Some of those things, once you've prioritized, they may not even fit on your immediate, or you'll do a bit later. You're not sure, you're not ready to purge them. So those you may want to, the next P, park them. Okay. So they're sort of there. You don't want to get rid of them entirely, but you're not in a position to prioritize them. You might want to park them. This is a danger area. The park ones are dangerous, because people want to keep them in park and they don't want to purge. So the interesting thing is to really be careful what you park, because otherwise those could be the area where, as you said earlier, you feel like a failure because you've parked so much stuff. They don't even match your passion, but realistically, you're never going to get around to doing it. Mm-hmm. And then the fun one, which I know is already sort of getting on to number 4, the fun one is the planning. So actually, we've said do it now, but you may actually need to plan it. You may need to get the money from it. You may need to find the time. You may need to get some new skills. You may need to practice something new, whatever it is that you need to do some planning, because you obviously can't just jump in and do everything now. And then once you've started it, the number 6P, but it's 5 of our do stuff, is to persevere. So once you've started it, find ways to keep yourself motivated through it. So whether it be hold yourself accountable by giving yourself rewards, or a lot of my clients would use me as their coach to help them be accountable to actually persevere towards that goal. So the passion, everything sort of hinged around the passion. And then there was the do stuff, which was the purge, the prioritize, the parking, the planning, and the persevering. And the Number 7P is my favorite, and that's party. So this is the one to celebrate success. And it's something that I find really interesting, especially with high achievers, is sometimes they do forget to celebrate success. They forget to take those little wins. I was talking to someone recently, actually, who'd been through a big health issue, and he'd done something that the medical professionals thought that he'd never be able to do. And he'd achieved it. And I was speaking to him, and he was already sort of moving on to the next thing. And I said to him, you've just got to enjoy it. Enjoy your moment of glory. And I'm all for people being motivated. And I'm one of those that's always moving my own goalposts and getting on with it. But we do actually need to acknowledge and enjoy the moment when we have done something. So that's my point.
Yeah. And I think of, as a project manager, we finish and that's going to be a P, is we don't celebrate success because we're moving on to the next P, which is the project, right? We keep moving and we don't stop to celebrate what we just did. It's like, next project, please. That's the achiever, the overachiever. That's what came to my mind was, I'm moving on to the next P, which is project, not party.
That's it. So there's 6, not 6. So the one is the party.
Yeah. This makes me think, everything you've listed here, I think of, number one, I'm closer to retirement than I am to 20. So when I think of what I have been sold as I move into retirement is, you need to save to travel. And, and that's on my bucket list, right? Like, I should travel. Honestly, it's not my passion. But I kind of got caught up in this. Yeah, you should save up to travel because that's what you're going to want to do when you retire. Maybe not me. That's not my passion. I've had this conversation with both my husband. We're like, no, we're not to travel the world. That's your journey or your journey, whoever's, not mine. And reading this, it made me realize that's okay. It's not on my things to do or my do, but so I thank you for that. That was kind of a realization that I had.
I'm glad it could help. But it is, I think that is a lot of the pressure and the misconception is that feeling that we need to, because the world, and I think one of the problems that we have these days as well is that people are living their lives on social media. And so a lot of what we do, a lot of our successes, our mistakes, everything else is in the public eye. And we are trying to keep up with the Joneses or the Kardashians or whoever it is in sort of your world. And we've forgotten sometimes what our own dreams and our own passions actually are.
Yeah.
So even in my book, what I sort of say to people is, I use my stories to inspire you, but it doesn't mean you need to go and do my stories. It doesn't mean you can Google top 10 bucket list items online. And I really don't like those because who's to say, as you've just said, they may not be your top 10 bucket list items. But go and find your own. Go and find your own things to do, but then don't do a bucket list. Just go and get on with it. And you may love what you're doing now and you then achieving, and you don't need a bucket list and you're content. And I say, good on you.
Yeah. Yeah. What I feel though, if people are listening though, but maybe they don't know what to do. They don't they've stopped dreaming. They have stopped coming up with ideas. They just, and I don't know if you have, why did people ever stop dreaming? What's that? Do you see something? Why do they stop growing? Why do they stop dreaming? I don't know. Do you know why?
Good question. I think if I get $1 million today, I think there's a little bit of a fear, fear of the unknown, a fear of what if my dreams don't come to fruition. And I think sometimes it's just we are too busy. We are too busy these days even to have the headspace to think about dreaming. So we just sort of head down, bottom up, getting on with stuff, and we just don't have time to dream. The other thing I was actually thinking about as you said that is, whilst you were talking about not your dreams, I think the thing is we may still be dreaming, but are we dreaming our own dreams, or are we trying to dream someone else's dreams or live out someone else's else's dreams. So maybe a combination of those. What I've also found though, Lisa, is in my work, I'm seeing more and more of almost the attitude, I've already been there, I already know it, I don't need to find out anymore, I don't need more. And I'm trying to determine what the cause of that is. The face of it, it almost sounds like arrogance. I don't need to be taught, I know it all. And it's a bit of a fixed mindset rather than a growth mindset. And you use that word growth. But I get the sense that it's not necessarily that. And I mentioned about us living our life on the stage because of our social media. I don't know if that's part of the problem. People feel like I need to have it together. I've got my LinkedIn profile and I've got my Instagram and I've got all of those things, and they all need to be perfect. So I'm so busy trying to do all of that I can't dream and try something that I haven't tried before, because maybe it's going to fail and that's going to be bad on my LinkedIn profile and my Facebook profile and my everything else. So I'll just do what I know because it's safe and it keeps my profile right.
But Glenda, we don't put it on Facebook or social media or anything. And it's funny because I'll admit it right here. Someone said to me yesterday in the restaurant, like, you are so busy. You're having so much fun in life. And I'm like, nope, that's just what you see on social media. I would never put, if I dreamed of something and I failed, which I don't believe in failure. I think it's just a path I took that I got to get back on the path. But I don't put it out there. And, maybe I should, because that's what's real. That's what authentic is, you know what? Tried that, failed, going a different way, but we don't. We put our best pictures and our best sides and our, that's what we do.
That's exactly. I mean, it is interesting. Do you want to be the first person that does it differently?
Okay.
Yes. So that's the thing. So to some degree, there's what everybody else thinks as well. So a lot of it comes from our image and a brand. There's a lot of emphasis in the marketplace now about your brand, and we're so scared of damaging our brand professionally and personally that I think it is a bit of a constraint, and it can paralyze people from trying something that they maybe haven't done anymore, because they may go on let's get rid of the failure word, on a different learning path to what they had hoped they would go on.
Yeah. And you learn something on that path. Like
Absolutely.
You take a different path, you learn, and you just get right back on. So I want to ask you about sometimes something happens in your life and it just changes your life. There is a pivotal moment. And I mean, I had one in 2007 that, my life was good. It was happy. And then I was in an earthquake in Peru and life changed. Life changed after that. I started looking at everything differently. Honestly felt that's probably the moment maybe God was clearly talking to me. I've just felt this and life changed. And it doesn't happen to everyone, but I think you sort of had a moment where I think there was a pivotal moment in your life that I just sort of read about, I believe, in your book.
Yeah. So I had a health scare. So, I mean, I guess you could summarize it by I nearly died. So I was one of the healthiest people I knew. I was fit. I was living in Australia at the time. I'd just been over to Europe then. I'd run Paris Marathon, had a wonderful time. I got back to Australia trying to do some running, and I couldn't breathe. I had sore legs, they swelled, and just carried on for a couple of months. And unfortunately, this is where sometimes my desire to keep moving can be a problem, because I kind of nearly killed myself. But long story short, I ended up in hospital, and they discovered a major 36 centimeter blood clot in my leg, and I had blood clot in my lungs. And in theory, a huge percentage, and I'm not going to quote too many percentages, of people would actually die from, either they wouldn't make it to the hospital or they'd die soon in the hospital. So it was, and I actually at the time didn't even think about that. I went into hospital and it was bad news, and they gave me medication and everything. It was only a few days afterwards, somebody said to me, "Yes, Glenda, you could have died." And it's like, oh yes, thanks for saying that. And so it was. I'd already thought I had things together. I already was doing lots of stuff. I was very fortunate that I'd already had a lot of experiences. I was planning for a little bit what you were saying. I was just like kind of laughing. That time at which I could spend less time actively working for money and do more travel and exciting things. But it was sort of in the future. And my husband and I had both sort of gone through that. And this just really made me think, well, it's no use waiting until later, because even when I thought I was really healthy, I wasn't as invincible as I thought I was. So
Invincible.
yeah, I thought I was totally invincible. I grew up with two older brothers and I chased them and beat them and everything else. So I just thought I was invincible, and suddenly I wasn't. So it did make me think. That said, it made me, there were good things about it and bad. It drove me, but it also introduced a bit of fear in my life that I hadn't experienced it before. So I had to overcome some of that as well, because suddenly it was like I'd aged 20 years overnight. So there were a few things. So that was, and to be honest, if I look at the sort of building of what's happened between, that was in 2016 and now, that was, I don't know that I'd be sitting in Florence, Italy right now if that hadn't happened. Or maybe I would have, but it may have been in 5 years' time. So it's sort of advanced everything for me to really think about going back to that passion. What was important to me, what was important to my husband, what was important to the people around me. So, yeah.
Yeah. So we transition a bit into the spiritual, because that's what we are about. Where were you in your faith journey when that incident happened in your life? So were you a follower of Jesus then? Did it something like, where were you, and how did you sort of lean on God at that time? Or did you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was very fortunate. My upbringing was within the church, but I gave my life to Jesus very early on in my life. So I've always known that I could depend on him. So maybe that's why I wasn't as panicked as I could have been. I don't really know. If I look back on it, it probably was part of it. I've kind of, maybe it was arrogance that thought it would pull me through, but I think I did know that God would pull me through. And so I did have both faith, knowledge that Jesus would pull me through, and friends from the church that visited, that looked after me, that prayed for me, that helped me through that. So it didn't make a major change at that stage. What has happened, though, is because I've been able to change my life and my focus a bit, I've got a little bit more time to actually get a more balanced view of my life, I guess, to look at the personal, the professional, and the spiritual side combined. Whereas I think before then, I think I probably did a lot of personal and professional, and the spiritual was always there. And I was actively involved in church and stuff, but probably it didn't have as much impact. I probably didn't integrate all the parts of my life consciously as well, if that makes sense. Not that I'm saying I'm doing it brilliantly, but I wasn't as aware of it before then.
You don't need to be perfect. None of us need to be perfect. I appreciate that integration, because I think that's where it started for me. Was I never integrated my professional. Like, what did God have to do with my professional? And at that point, that's when things started to all come together for me personally. But listening to people, because there's some people that have had faith all their lives, and some people don't, and they wonder, where do they get it? And they just have to start. They just have to seek. They just have to reach out, ask. So I think we all have a story, a journey. So thank you for sharing that. I want to ask you, because I love asking other leaders, and especially from around the world, because I'm like, what are people reading? What is one of your favorite all-time leadership books? Or maybe you're reading it now. Can you give us a little hint?
That's a big question. I find it difficult to pinpoint one leadership book. I guess I've read so many and recommended so many to different people at different times. And I think a lot of books are good at what they're good at. So they're good in particular scenarios or particular circumstances. Probably one that has stood the test of time for me is Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence. But then if I start thinking about that term, the test of time, I also have to go to the Bible. And at the risk of sort of sounding super spiritual, the examples that we've got in the Bible about kind of good and bad leadership. So you look at the kings and the apostles and the prophets. Some of them are kind of good behaviors, some are really bad, but we can definitely see the impact that both the good and the bad behaviors and actions had on the people that they were leading. And then, of course, for me, the epitome of good servant leadership would be Jesus, and he'd be the leader that I'd kind of want to model myself on and aspire to. So, yeah.
Those are great examples. I think, and I've said this before on podcasts, just the whole book of Proverbs is a leadership book. If anyone is listening, you can find it probably on the internet, Google it, or a Bible, but there's so much there. It's so good. But so we actually met through LeaderImpact, and not that we had met, but I'd seen you through, I think, a video or something. So how did you get involved in LeaderImpact?
Well, I knew a few people from LeaderImpact. And in 2020, so the beginning of 2020, I had the privilege of being invited to Auckland, New Zealand, to be part of a launch of LeaderImpact in the region. So there were different people from different parts of LeaderImpact in the world came to kind of bring it to the leaders of Auckland and to start the process there. And then at the end of that meeting, I kind of got inspired, went back to Australia, and within days, we all started hearing the term coronavirus, and the world started shutting down. So it was, oh yes, we were talking about having these group meetings. We can't have group meetings anymore because people can't get together. So I actually started up the first Zoom online LeaderImpact meeting. And the good thing about that is it meant we actually could have people from Australia and New Zealand. So it actually worked quite well. There was some benefits. So we had 7 of us from across Australia and New Zealand went through the LeaderImpact Foundation's material. So we worked through our values and matching our intent to actions, challenged each other on how good our integrity was in terms of our actions and our intentions. We sort of connected on those things that we had in common and challenged each other and learned from those things that we disagreed on. So it was a really good experience.
Yeah. And, I started my first group at probably after you, because it wasn't right when COVID started, but I do in my whole province, an online group, and we can pull in people from anywhere in our province, and it's really great. And we're still going today. And to anyone listening, I love these ladies. So good way to go for you. And, starting up your own group. Thank you for that. I have 2 last questions that I ask everyone, all my guests. And I mean, that LeaderImpact is dedicated to having leaders having a lasting impact. So as you continue to move through your journey, have you considered what you want your faith legacy to be when you leave this world?
I have, and I'm going to be a little bit naughty. I'm actually going to steal some words from Paul in the Bible, from his letter to Timothy. Although that said, I have put my own little kind of spin on them. So as you probably would have guessed, and I'm going to read it because otherwise I'm going to get all tongue twisted. That I have fought the fight, that I've done everything that I was required to do, that I've used the gifts that I've been given, that I've appreciated the blessings that I've received, and that I've motivated others to do the same.
That's awesome. And there's no twist. That is yours, or that is from the Bible, isn't it? Or did you twist? Did you add?
It is from the Bible, but I added that I've motivated others to do the same. I think in addition. So, but it is pretty much from the Bible. I got to love Paul. So yeah.
Yeah, that is. And where did you find that in Paul?
It's in 2 Timothy. So let me look at the exact 2 Timothy 4 verses 7 to 8. If anybody wants to look that up.
All right. And my last question is about joy. And I read something in your book, and it was where you sort of talked about some people really love to do those crazy things. Good for them. And then you say, ultimately, Carter abandoned the idea of ticking items off his list to return to the simplicity of life, his family, and his faith, to what he deemed brought him joy. And then I think Edward went on to climb mountains, and maybe he died. I don't know.
I think he died on the mountain, to be honest. Yeah.
But he died what he loved doing. And that, that's the thing. But so my question for you is, what brings you the greatest joy?
Yeah, good question. Well, I guess I had to work through this partly because it ties with the concept of passion. So when we were going through the 7 Ps, but if I look at sort of joy for me and I look at it in its entirety, if I purely look at what makes me happy, I could look each day and I could say, well, I'm living in Florence, Italy. So each day as I sip on my caffè macchiato, or I eat my pistachio brioche, or I walk across the 700-year-old Ponte Vecchio over the Arno River, or I gaze at the Uffizi gallery at the paintings there, it's utter bliss. And a lot of people would think I'm living, as people would term, the Dolce Vita. What they don't see, and it's a bit like you were saying earlier about what we don't put on social media, what they don't see are the times that I burst into tears because I walk into a shop and I try my wonderful new Italian skills, and the person behind the counter just says, just speak in English. Or I'm standing in the queue at the police, the questura, where we have to do our immigration papers, and I'm there all day while I'm trying to sort out my residence permit. Or I've been conned by somebody because I don't know the language and culture. Then I burst into tears. So each day is filled with these sort of ups and downs, and it changes. And I hate the term that's life, but I think that is pretty much it. I think life is full of ups and downs. So if I really think about joy, it's something that needs to be consistent. So for me, the thing that would give me joy is the fact that I know that somebody loves me unconditionally, and it doesn't change. And I'd love to say that person that loves me unconditionally is my husband of, God bless him, of 30 plus years, Walter. But our love gets challenged. And I don't think I could honestly say that. But so from my perspective, joy, that unconditional love that I get from Jesus, is the thing that will give me joy no matter what I've done, and no matter what the circumstances.
Oh, Glenda, you're just awesome.
Oh, you're so sweet. You can make me feel so good, Lisa.
I feel like sometimes these are for Lisa to have sessions with great people, great authors, leaders, business coach. Like I love being able to share this time with you. So I just want to thank you for sharing, sort of kicking out the bucket list and giving us your 7 Ps and just your time. It has been, I'm so thankful I continue to track you down and that we were able to meet. Thank you for spending the time with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great for me because we often don't take the time to sit through and think through these things ourselves. So I've actually benefited so much from this process of going through and thinking about, what drives me and what gives me joy and what my faith legacy is. So it's a great opportunity. So thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, if people are listening, they're listening to the podcast, they've enjoyed listening to you and they want to engage with you, how can they find you?
The easiest is probably to look me up on LinkedIn, because then all they need to know is my name. I also have a website that I share with my husband, which is just mitchell.news. So simple, mitchell.news. There's a contact us page on there that they could read all stories if they would like to do that, see what I've been up to, but also you can just go into the contact us page and contact me through that.
All right. Well, thank you again, Glenda. It has been an absolute pleasure, and just thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Lisa.
All right. Well, if you're part of Leader Impact, you can always discuss or share this podcast with your group. And if you are not yet in a Leader Impact group, we would love to have you. Check out groups available in Canada at leaderimpact.ca, or if you're listening from anywhere else in the world, check out leaderimpact.com or get in touch with us by email, info@leaderimpact.ca, and we will connect you. And if you like this podcast, please leave us a comment, give us a rating or a review. This will help other global leaders find our podcast. Thank you for engaging with us. And remember, impact starts with you.